right. Okay. Good morning, Will. Good morning, Sean. How are you guys?
Good. How are you?
Great. Great. So we're at 9:59. We're just going to wait for a few people to join. I always like to start it just a minute early to let everyone in. And I will begin momentarily here. It's nice to see you guys back at the office.
We got our waffles behind us.
Yes, I do see that. That's great. I'm excited to get back into the office soon here. Okay, so just, oh, Karen's back in. Okay. Maybe she's planning on joining us today. All right, well, while we're just waiting for, it looks like quite a few people are in here, so that's fabulous. I am going to begin this webinar. Let me just pull up my presentation and share my screen. Okay. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm so excited to be here. This is our first application development webinar that we've done this year. We have been doing a lot on cybersecurity and on Teams when everyone went home due to the pandemic. We were really busy doing these webinars, but today we're going to focus on modern application development and how to finally build an app that engages your customers and employees with confidence. Application development, previously, I've been doing this for 20 years and it was only for large corporations. And today it's really meant for small, mid-sized businesses, which is a lot of the clients that we work with. Right now, I would say here's what's changed, right? It used to be really expensive to build an application. It took a lot of time. It was really complicated, and that's not the case today. Right now, small, mid-sized businesses are building these applications to help them differentiate themselves from their competitors, to bring efficiency into their organization, or even to act on a dream that they've had for a long time to start a new company or a platform for their industry. And so today we want to show you how you can do that within your business. With me, I have Sean Blair. Sean's been our Chief Technology Officer for over 5 years here at MXO, but he has over 20 years of experience delivering projects and products in various industries. He's had a big background in consulting. And he has a huge passion for technology. So he leads the technology here at MXO Tech. And we've been doing application development for 15 years since we started. We're also most companies know us as an IT managed service provider, but we have this wing of application development, which is led by Sean. And last year, when we had a lot of needs and asks of our clients for mobile development, we brought in Will Terrill, who is our senior mobile developer. And Will has a large background in multiple industries. He's worked with mobile applications, e-commerce platforms, and just has a strong engineering background. And so he's our lead here at MXO, leading that team, building mobile applications. Even since we started doing that, I got so excited about it. I asked them to build a mobile application for MXO Tech. So I've been on that journey myself. Of course, we're the shoemakers kids. So we're doing it as we have some time, but I can't wait to bring that to our internal team and our customers. So I'm excited to release that out, hopefully late summer of this year. All right, agenda. So What we're going to go over is how do I choose a partner to build my application? And that includes this live coding demo that Will is going to show you. I wanted this to be really interesting for everyone on this call and show you, what happens. How do we do this, right? Because sometimes we like create stories in our heads, and there's this imagination how complicated this could be. But we've brought in some efficiency with the technology that we use, and we want to show you exactly how we do it, so there's no surprises. And then, what do you need to know before you consider commissioning a mobile application, which I think is really important, and then putting it all together, what to expect. So I'm hoping everyone who's on this call today is going to walk away knowing if this is the right thing for you, and how easy or difficult it may be, hopefully easy, and what to expect. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Will. Oh, and by the way, real quick, before Will gets started, and he's muted, and I think Sean's not, we, if you have any questions, you want to put them in the chat. I'll be looking at the chat for your questions, and I'll be answering them, moderating this session. So, Will, I will let you take it away.
Outstanding. Hello, everyone. I know that we have an international crowd here today. I saw that there were a number of people coming in from Chile as well. So quería decir bienvenido a mis amigos allí. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about really the finer side of application building, because there's, of course, the very technical side, but then there's how do you even get started? How do you go and meet these things together? Because what we've seen is that it's really important to start out with the UI UX experience. And the reason is that you probably have apps on your phone right now that you use all the time. And there are little animations that you like. It's easy to find. You know the certain twists that you need to do with your thumb to get exactly where you need to be. That's something that is very difficult to communicate in between the owners, the people that want the app, and the coders, the people that are making the app. And that's really where we start to focus, is right in that area. So one of the things that I want to talk about is about a UI UX practice. And of course, if you don't know what that means, that's a user interface, user experience. And it really is all of the buttons that are on a screen, but it also is how does everything flow together? And we really are looking to lead with design. That is probably the most important piece that we have. The reason that the iPhone became so popular way back when is that they thought more about the user than the technology. The truth is that mobile apps existed before the iPhone did, but no one really wanted to use it because it was the world of techies. Also, when you're looking to choose someone, we want to talk a little bit about a portfolio, what that looks like, and how you actually get good references. I want to talk a little bit about being on time and on budget. And what you're going to hear me talk about is how to mitigate uncertainty, how to kill uncertainty and get it as small as possible. You can never quite get rid of it, but there's always a way to minimize it. I'm going to talk a little bit about a live coding demo. I'm going to show you something that I personally love, and that is a product that came out about 3 years ago, and it's called Google Flutter. And its whole basis is one code base, many platforms. And that does a lot to decrease the amount of uncertainty, which is what you'll hear me say many times. And finally, something that very rarely gets talked about is the post-project support. Next slide, please. So let's see. So let's talk about what it means by leading with design. So when we go back and forth, initially there's like, okay, there's conversations. What is it you have in mind? Who are you trying to reach? What kind of user research do we need to make? And along the way, we start building prototypes. And that's what you're going to hear again and again, is how to make prototypes. Because a prototype is different than just a PDF document that shows up on your screen and has pretty pictures and shows what the buttons look like. It's something that is live, that's dynamic, that you can actually use it as the real application. However, it doesn't have real data behind it. So this is a way to start the communication process between the design firm and the developers themselves. So we have 2 to 3 weeks where we're trying to figure out what's going on. Then we do this mid-fi prototyping where we're taking something and we're starting to make it look a little bit more like the end product. So we're going to focus initially on components like a button, a drop-down, things of this nature. But then later on, we're going to get into a mid-fi where it's starting to come together. And then that's about 2 to 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks. Then we have a high-definition prototype where it is basically the final product. However, it isn't hooking up to the internet. It doesn't have real data, but it's something that you can actually operate in your hand and see if you like the look and feel of it. So then from that, we designed the functional spec and roadmap. And so we're looking about 8 to 12 weeks for the entire engagement. And so that piece of it is key to develop the portfolio, and we'll talk a little bit about what a portfolio looks like now. So if you could open up, please, the demo that's there. And so a little bit about some demos that we have in the past. Now, this is a website that we use here at MXO Tech to actually show the types of prototypes that we've made in the past. And if you could please open up the Greater Chicago Food Depository. This was a project that I was key in, and I had the opportunity to work with a fantastic organization that is doing great things here in Chicago, especially during the pandemic. So what we developed here is an actual prototype that the people, now this doesn't have any real data behind it, but the users could actually go in, and you can see there's Joe Auditor in the upper right. You can see that the users can go in and see how it's actually going to look like, how it's going to function as I shift in between the different menus, as I'm typing in things. And this is a great key to start the communication process between the developers, between design, and between the actual end user. And this is a key form of communication. And this communication is what I'm talking about by trying to minimize uncertainty. If you can please go back to the PowerPoint, please. So you can see that the last point is driving the product vision down to the developers and getting that communication right. Okay, next slide, please. So this is where I'm talking about unknowns, that a project timeline has everything to do with complexity and effort, because of course, the more complex something, the more effort, and these are things that we can't do away with, but that's multiplied by the unknowns. And if you can minimize the unknown, the project timeline is much better. Now, some of the ways that we can also do that is to do things in phases. Now, the way that we do it here is that we are looking to have a more agile-like way of communicating with our end user. And that means that we are doing in phases. We're doing every 2 weeks. We're showing, hey, we worked on this. Are we going in the right direction? Is this right? And we're taking feedback in real time that we then display in the next phase and the next phase, so that there is this constant churn, this constant ability to do it on the fly. Now, there's another method called waterfall, where you start here and you finish this and you finish this and you finish this, and you get all the way to the end, and then the user sees the end product. We found that that doesn't really work. Having this ability to change things on the fly goes a long way to minimizing the unknowns. Next slide, please. Testimonials. So how many times have you been on Amazon, maybe Mercado Libre in Chile, and you're trying to figure out what it is you're going to buy? Are you going to go with the one that has 5-star reviews, but it has only 9 people that have actually reviewed it? Or are you going to go with the one that has 2,000 reviews and has, you know, maybe 200 of those are 1-star and 200 of those are 5-star? You kind of tend to go in the middle because you believe those more. You think that that actually has some way of verifying. Unfortunately, in this world of application development, it's going to be rare to get people that have 2,000 testimonies. So some of that gut feel that you've developed while you're using some of the different apps that you use isn't going to really work. That's why we use something called, or we encourage people to use something called clutch.co. And I highly recommend you go to their website. If you could, Joanna, open that up. If not, that's fine. But what clutch.co does is it opens up clutch.co is a way of having a vetted testimony. And the way that it works is that I write a review, I send it to clutch.co, and then they call me to make sure that my review actually makes sense, that it really is something that fits in the overall scheme of things. Am I a real person? Am I from a firm that is different from that it's a competitor, and that I'm going to put 2 stars. And so this is actually what we have here at clutch.co to talk about what our actual reviews are. So this is a way that you can go out and get testimonies that make sense. So we highly encourage that is you look for those 2 things. You look for a portfolio, and you are looking for a way to get good reviews and good references from the different clients that people have had in the past. And this is kind of a difficult thing to get. Go ahead, please.
Now, I'll just add, sometimes also on these sites, for me at least, I want to see some of the work, right? Whether this work appeals to you or it doesn't, you see what we've built and what we've done, and you can click on any of these if that particular company shows their examples of their work. Without having to call them and go through the process, you could find a lot of information in addition to what the clients are saying is kind of the value, and if this fits your style, that what you're looking for. And here you could go through all of these, and you could click on read full review. But I agree with Will. I really love this type of site. There's other sites as well that are similar, but you are not able to just have a friend add this type of review for you, because they do really verify all that information. So you could find a lot more about their services. And nowadays, and I'll go back to this while I talk, but these sites are starting to come up on Google search before even your own website is coming up. So it should be very easy to find. All right, well, back from this slide.
Outstanding. So next slide, please. So now we've talked a little bit about the design, the back and forth, and remember that there are 2 key things that I was talking about in order to minimize the amount of uncertainty. And key thing number 1 is good references, and key thing number 2 is good portfolio. And so now I'm going to shift from the design world a little bit more into the development world. Now that's the world that I live in. In fact, the very first time that I created this demo, I was told this is way too geeky. It's way too coder specific. But I find that there needs to be at least some knowledge about what's actually happening. So there's all these different development platforms. You're going to hear native platform, native iOS, which is Apple. You're going to have native Android. You have, React Native. You have, web apps. You have native for desktop. You have, operating in C#. There's a huge amount. And so people always ask me, is this a good one? Like what's better? And typically it doesn't matter. Typically. However, I will say that there has been a development in the last couple of years, and this is what I'm going to show you today, where having the ability to take one code base and to communicate that immediately to multiple platforms is really important. And the reason is that if, let's say you have an idea, then you take that idea, you talk to the designer, and then the designer has to talk to all of the different teams that are using the different technology. They have to go to the iOS guys and say, oh my God, can you make this look this way? They have to go to the desktop teams. And all of that really maximizes uncertainty. But if you can take all of that communication and compress it down to one pipeline, that goes a really long way to decreasing the amount of uncertainty. So let me go ahead and show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so this is what Flutter looks like. And I'm going to go ahead and fire these things off because it takes just a little bit of time before it comes up. But let me tell you what I have here. So you can see I have, this is the Android world here. This is the iOS world on the right side. And so what you'll see here in just a second, as these things are kicking off, I'm going to run a demo app on my computer that is based on this code. Now, you saw what I did on the screen before, which is just these two commands in here, and I am instantly running on Android, which is here, on iOS, which is here, on the web, whoops, not this one. Well, on the, oh, there's the web. The web just showed up. So on the web, which is this here, and I'm running this from my own local server. And finally, this is from, this is native desktop Macintosh, which is what I'm using right now. So I have the ability to have all of these different platforms come out from one code base. So let me talk a little bit about why that's a good thing. So let's say that, I have, right now, I have here that I'm using the color blue. And someone comes to me and they say, hey, I want you to update that. So instead of blue, I want it to look white. And I think, okay, white, I'm going to make it look like this color here. And so I take it, and I am going to run this. And I can see that immediately, whoops, of course, let me try that again. So I can see that just making that one change, I've now changed that one code in these three, and I'm going to change this one as well, on the web as well. So I have made this one beast, that one little change, I've been able to change all the different platforms that are associated with what's going on. Well, now I come back and say, no, I don't want eggshell white, I want pure white. So that would be a very easy mistake to make as you're going between different teams. And so I come back here, I make my code change, and I immediately am able to take that white and to make it into a dazzling white. Well, it can be much more than that, and this is kind of a theme here, but I could also go even further and say that it is actual functionality. So this here, this is actually a prototype that we made at MXO Tech for a fitness app, and I just started with, this is the amount of calories that you've eaten, this is the amount of calories that you burned. I can shift here to show different exercises that I'm able to use and to track. Well, let's say that I decide that I want to add something like the amount of water that I've drank, or I want to add some of the different beasts of exercise. I want to know how many calories are in a given meal. So now I have all this code commented out. I'm now going to make it live. And so I can take that, I make those changes, and then instantly I have all of that information that is immediately able to go out to all of the different areas, the different platforms, and I'm able to push them immediately to the different platforms. So what that means is that communication, all of that communication that you would have to do between the designers and those different teams is now taken away. I have one designer, I have one team, I have one communication, I have minimized the amount of uncertainty just by making that one change. So typically platform doesn't matter, but I have to say that in this case, I think it matters a lot.
Wow, times have
changed,
Will, since 20 years ago when I started in IT. Your job has gotten much easier.
Yes, yeah, without a doubt. Now, Joanna, if you could please share your screen with the PowerPoint, I would appreciate it.
Got it. All right. Well, take it away.
Okay, let's see. I am not seeing the PowerPoint.
Okay. Maybe I'm not sharing it, so let's see.
Well, the last thing to talk about really in all this is the support, is the long-term support that you're going to get. So this is something that's not really talked about when you're first starting. You're talking about, okay, I want it to be blue, and I want the user to come in with the experience and be able to see all of my products immediately. But the truth is that when you partner up with a company, it's really important that you're talking about long-term, because that company then becomes an expert in your particular solution. So some of the questions that it's important to ask is about the warranty period. Every single app, I mean, I would love to say that I'm perfect, but every single app that I've ever written has bugs. It has issues, it has things that I didn't think about, it has cases that are kind of crazy for me, things that I didn't know. And so having a warranty period goes a long way to be able to give you the kind of assuredness that you need to be able to know that it's going to work out of the gate. So the other part is a support team. Now, here at MXO Tech, we do something that's a little bit different. We have two sides of the houses. Now, there's the development side, which is where I work, but we also have an MSP side, a managed service provider, that actually is basically a help desk. So we are well equipped to not only do the development, but also to take your ideas and then keep them moving on and keep your users engaged, but also when they have problems that they have someone to turn to. And finally, we have additional features or changes that are being handled. Now, maybe they're going to come from you, but also because of the MSP side, because of the fact that we can talk to each other, they're going to say, hey, man, we are hearing the same thing over and over and over again. Do you think you could just do this one change? So those changes could even come from internal, specifically because we can marry up the help desk with the development side. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean Blair.
All right, thanks, Will. Love that demo. That's good stuff. If you're a business owner and you're like me, you want to talk about, okay, I love the coding. Now what do I need to expect for a budget? So over the next few minutes, we're going to look at budgeting. We're going to look at how much time is going to be required from you or your staff. We're going to look at how do we prevent the dreaded long project tail that you've probably read about or heard horror stories about. We're going to talk a little bit about the user experience and how to make it engaging, and then some considerations for total cost of ownership. All right, so what do I need to get started? What can I expect for a starting budget? There are several things that go into your budget. Some of those things at a high level are how you engage your audience. There is a cost for the upfront design and prototyping typically. For some firms will offer this as a loss leader, and some firms don't do this very fully. You've heard Will talk about, and we showed some high fidelity prototypes. We'll talk a little bit about that difference. There's of course cost for development, the quality assurance process, and then some costs related to publishing the app. There are technology costs that you need to consider, and then also just the rollout. All right, so here's some rules of thumb for pricing. Anytime we talk to a customer, this is always the first thing we get asked about. So what we're talking about here is pricing for a minimum viable product. So you're going to see this MVP repeatedly on the next few slides. As Will mentioned earlier, we highly suggest that you break down your long-term vision into small chunks, starting with a minimum viable product. And so for design and prototyping for your MVP, you can expect to pay anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 for that. Some firms, as I mentioned, will do this as sort of a loss leader, and they'll recoup that cost while they develop the actual application. But rest assured, you're going to pay for this if they develop a full high fidelity prototype for you that you can click through. Other firms, if they don't do that, what they'll do is they'll do a back of the napkin drawing for you. It could look like, they call them wireframes typically. At MXO Tech, it's been a journey. As Joanna mentioned, she's been doing this a long time. Over the course of my tenure, we started off doing wireframes, which it looks like something you would draw on a piece of paper, and it kind of shows you where the fields are. And that's a good starting place, but as Will mentioned, it doesn't eliminate the unknowns. It doesn't allow you to play with the application. And when we build applications, or when anyone builds applications, we're building them for human consumption. And it's impossible to know how humans are going to interact with something until they could actually interact with it. So my recommendation is that you find a firm that can do that prototyping and know that this is going to be something you're going to have to pay for in one way or another.
I'm so glad you're talking about that, Sean, because honestly, we as a company did not do that until Sean came in. And what I loved about adding that process to our development is that not only, so Will showed you earlier the Greater Chicago Food Depository iOS app, right? That was actually a prototype. That wasn't a live app. And what's really cool, they were working on building something like that for a while, but we were able to deliver and say, here, this is exactly what it's going to look like. They could toggle, they can, use it as if it's a real application. It just didn't have a database tied behind it. So for me, I'm a visual person. I think most people are as well. And this is worth gold. And for $5,000 to $15,000, I would pay that any day, because I will know, it's a small investment to know if it's something that could really bring a lot of value to your organization. So I love, Sean, that you added that to our company, and it's been a big success.
Definitely, thank you. Okay, so after design and prototyping, I mentioned that you're going to want to break down your long-term vision into a minimum viable product and then subsequent phases. So what you can expect for the development for an MVP is somewhere between $20,000 and $35,000. And then after that, you're going to want to bolt on additional features. Those are smaller efforts typically, and those can range anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000. A lot of times for B2B or business to consumer applications, it's going to require some integration to your back office, and that could be your ERP or perhaps your CRM or maybe just your invoicing, something like that. Those type of integrations to enable your mobile application are somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000 typically. And then there are always security and reporting type components, and those together cost somewhere between $10,000 to $15,000 typically. Next slide. All right, so what's the timeline? Now we know the cost. So design and prototyping for an MVP is somewhere between 3 and 6 weeks. This depends on the complexity of the UI and the user experience. It also depends on how engaged your team is. But yeah, 3 to 6 weeks is what you can expect for your design and prototyping. The development for the MVP is typically somewhere between 60 and 90 days. And then, again, that can vary depending on complexity, but that's what you can typically expect. Additional feature development is 3 to 5 weeks. Those integrations can be 2 to 3 weeks. And then dashboards and security somewhere between 2 to 3 weeks. And just so you know, too, on that timeline, after the prototyping is complete, a lot of those activities can be done in parallel as well. All right, so this slide I don't want to skip over or understate in any way, because this is a good way to take a project if this is not considered. How much of my time will be required as a business owner, or maybe not your time, but somebody at your organization is going to need to fulfill this product owner role. The product owner, they're the person who focuses on the business return on investment. They know everything there is to know about the use case for that application that you want to have developed, and they understand just all the business problems that this application is supposed to solve. Engagement from that product owner is vital, especially during the prototyping phase and then the early portions of the project. My recommendation, if you commission an application, that person needs to spend 50% of their time with the project team, especially at the outset. Prototyping is a pretty iterative process, and you're going to find during that process that the UI UX team, they're going to frequently be asking you, what do you think about this? Here's the feedback we got from user testing. They're going to need your time.
And one thing to add on there is the greater that percentage is, the less uncertainty there is. So if it's a 25% is the only thing you can mount, well, okay, then that's going to increase the amount of uncertainty that's in the project. Because speaking as a developer, having a product owner to talk to when there's an issue is vital.
Absolutely.
Sean, could you just spend a minute talking about the role of a UX UI designer other than making something look pretty?
Yeah, so the UI part is kind of the look pretty, but the UX part of that role is really about how the user will interact with the application. So we develop applications for a pretty wide array of customers, anywhere from construction companies to major payers in the U.S., healthcare insurance payers. So the user experience looks very different, from a construction worker in the field on a ruggedized iPad to a nurse who's retired. It's a very different experience. So that UI UX designer, they're not just thinking about making things look pretty. They're also thinking about how the user is going to interact with the program, the application. And so they're involved throughout the whole project, typically, because they're considering the actual audience that's going to use the application.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's great. I think that's so important, and we were showing a nonprofit application for a food bank, right? Sometimes, even though you know your industry really well, you may not know what that application should function like. And so we help you gather those requirements and actually put that into an application. A lot of times I've seen the team, they'll take Excel spreadsheets and Word documents and emails and combine all that and create an app out of it. So basically taking, 5 to 10 different workflows and making that into a mobile app, which is really cool. And you can imagine how much time that saves.
All right, thanks, Joanna. So the next question is, how do I prevent that dreaded long project tail? You heard me say that 60 to 90 days is typical for an MVP. All of us have heard, especially business owners, have heard cases where, you're quoted 90 days and then 18 months later, they're still working on the application. That can happen for a lot of reasons. One of the big reasons why that happens is that, the companies will bite off way more than they can chew. And so that's why we've been harping on this, focusing on the minimum viable product. What is the smallest chunk that can give you a good return on investment? Focusing on that while considering a long-term vision is extremely important. Joanna mentioned too, I've spent some time in consulting. I have friends in a lot of the big consulting firms and have seen firsthand while working in those consulting firms, they want to get on their books, a $2 million 2-year project from companies. Looks good financially, but I guarantee you there's no way they know everything. They know enough to tell you that it's actually going to be 2 years and $2 million. Any company that tells you that is not being totally forthcoming with you. So you want a partner that's going to help you figure out how to focus on this MVP, and then while you're considering this application, ask yourself that question: what is the smallest chunk that will give me the best return on investment? Focus on a very short-term piece and have your development team do that, prototype that for you, and I guarantee with a vision, with an eye towards the long-term vision, you're going to succeed. All right, and then how do I drive towards the target audience engagement? So high-fidelity prototyping, we've said it many times. I've been told that people have to hear things many times before they fully digest it, and so we've mentioned this many times. High-fidelity prototyping, that's the no-code type demo that we showed you for Greater Chicago Food Depository. something we can do really rapidly. It allows you to try before you buy. And then it also allows end user testing before any coding is done. End user testing can come in a couple different flavors. There is a website called usertesting.com. What we do with that is we'll put together the prototype, and then we'll have user testing actually use the application, the prototype, and that they have thousands of people that are testing it at that point. So that gives us great feedback before we write any lines of code. And that'll give us a lot of tips towards audience engagement and making sure that it is the best user experience for whomever is going to use the app. The second bullet here, can you go back real quick? You have to consider the audience device usage. So I loved Will's demo for many reasons. Not only does it save you a lot of money when you're having an application developed because you don't have to redevelop it, 5 times. But it also is huge for audience engagement because it allows this no device left behind paradigm. With Flutter, and it's very unique in this way, you can compile to iOS, to Android, to the web, to Mac OS, Linux, and Windows, all with one code base. There are other solutions out there that promise that, but Flutter is by far the most advanced and capable solution out there for this. All right, total cost of ownership consideration. So we talked a little bit about the initial design and development project. We looked at the budget for those things. So you've seen that, but you also need to consider hosting and licensing, especially if you're doing something that has a database in the back end. Depending on the scope, you might end up needing to use a licensed version of SQL. That can have significant costs for it. Hosting for a web application also has costs. So when you're working with a partner, make sure that you ask questions about hosting and licensing. Security, backup, and disaster recovery often get overlooked. So you're going to want to ask, what are you doing for security for this? And what does it cost me? Backup and disaster recovery is also not free. So you're going to want to ask, how do I know that after I build this app, that if we get hacked or something, how do I recover? You want to make sure that they have a thorough plan for that, and there's going to be costs that are associated with that. And then, as Will mentioned during his talk, ongoing application support, updates, and maintenance, having a team that's capable of doing that for you is part of that overall cost of ownership. All right, so let's really quickly look at what it looks like to put this all together. It's important to understand what the budget typically looks like. You need to be willing to have you or someone on your staff engaged half-time with your partner firm in order to make sure that the unknowns are minimized and that the team is successful. Ensure that your partner firm leads with user experience and interface design. We've talked a lot about that. And then ensure your partner firm has a process in place to drive user engagement. We mentioned Flutter and the no device left behind type policy. Reduce all the unknowns and contain costs. Okay, so this is what it looks like at MXO Tech. This sort of like double infinity cyclical thing here is meant to show that you're taking an overall vision and doing it in iterations. So in circle number 1 there, we're going to start with your MVP, defining your vision and X factor, and then we're going to go up and we're going to do that user research and prototyping. We're going to get feedback on that prototype, refine that prototype, get acceptance for the refinements, and then do the prioritization so that the development process can actually start in bubble number 7. And then it goes through quality assurance testing, the user acceptance testing, and then finally deployment of that MVP. And then we're back to bubble number 1 where we do this again for the next phase. This allows us to minimize all the unknowns and iteratively give you exactly what you're looking for. All right, thank you. Joanna?
All right, thank you both. That was so informational I always learn things, even though I work with you guys. We want to open this up for some questions. But in the meantime, what we thought we would do is if any of our clients who are on the line today or prospects, if you're interested, you've thought about building your own mobile app or any type of app, but you haven't really put the time into it and you didn't want to make a big investment. Today, we're offering everyone, first of all, a free 1-hour consultation to talk with Will and Sean and bounce your ideas around of what you're thinking about and see if there's a possibility to move forward. Or two, we will be offering for 2 people to have either 2 4-hour sessions or 1-hour 8-hour design session that what we're going to do some rapid prototyping for you with your specifications of what you might already have. Our UX guidelines and brainstorming to define the best approach for a product. And you're going to get something in writing that's going to really help you move into that next phase. So we typically charge somewhere between $5,000 to $10,000 for these sessions. We're offering it today $3,000. If you want to do it, again, small investment, but we want to offer this to our audience today, to the first 2 attendees who sign up. You can sign up by emailing Sean directly at sblair@mxotech.com. You could always email me at jsobran@mxotech.com, and I'm happy to talk to any of you. All right, let's see. So I will open this up for questions. Let's see. Do we have any questions from the audience? I always find questions helpful from people. Always gives me ideas of what to add to the next webinar. So, okay, we have one question here. How do I get my app added to the iPhone so it's out on the market? What does that process look like? Can one of you answer that? Great, thanks.
That's totally a me question.
Okay.
So the way that you get your app onto the, and I'll talk both about the Google Play and the App Store. So they have a process right now, which actually is in litigation to make it more open. But basically, you take the file that I create and you give it to Apple, and Apple then checks to make sure that it goes with all of their different requirements, and they do have a lot. That's actually one of those things that's good to know, to have a company that has a couple apps already out there, just so that they know the things to avoid. Like, for example, they'll check, is there information that is available for children? And if it is, it needs to have some, type of warning out there. So after you get it past them, they send it to what's called test flight. And test flight, you have the ability to give it to a set amount of users. So let's say that you don't want to open it up to everything and to all of your customers. You want to open it up to maybe just the people that are in the building that you work in, and maybe it's just, to friends and family, things of that. And then after that, from the test flight, you just shift it over, and it's available for download like every single app that you have ever put onto your phone. Google Play is the exact same thing, but their requirements are not as stringent. Apple, wow, they have incredibly stringent rules, and Android, not really. In fact, I always judge an application house if they only have things that are out there for Google, for Android, and they have nothing out for iOS. That might mean that they probably don't have the powerhouse out there to get an app out to the market quickly.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question here. What if I've already built my mobile application and want to rewrite it? Will that save me time and money?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So it depends. I know that's a terrible answer. It depends is a terrible answer. So what will happen, we get asked this question a lot. What we do when we get asked this question is we'll vet the current application. That'll mean that we need to have access to the code base from your previous developer. And we'll see if it's something that can be extended and developed upon. We find that it's about a 50-50. Sometimes it can be, sometimes it can't be. In the case where the previous development firm has done a good job, and documented their code and followed all the industry standards, it will save you some money. But the reality is we found that people who are moving on and asking us to do this, they haven't had a great experience with their firm. So that typically means that, the projects have gone over time or over budget, and oftentimes the code kind of follows what you could expect from a firm that will do that to you. So I hope that answers the question, but it just depends on the quality of the code.
And on the other hand, there is one thing that might work in your advantage, and that is that you're kind of starting out with perhaps a working prototype. So maybe some of that prototyping piece can be shortened just a bit. But Sean's right that the coding, well, that depends. It depends on the language. It depends on its usefulness. But actually, if it's written in something else and can be channeled into something like Flutter that then can go to many platforms, well, going that route might be the way to go, because then, despite the fact that you have one code base, rewriting it in something that can go out to many platforms might be something that would be quite useful.
Absolutely.
All right, I have actually one more question here. Will it save me time if I can convert an existing web application into a mobile application, or is it like starting from scratch?
So I think I'm going to build on what Will said last. If you have a really good web app and you want it to be a mobile app, that will hopefully mean that the UI UX design has been thoroughly vetted. And so, as Will mentioned, we'll need to take that web app. We can't necessarily port the code over to something like Flutter, but we can take the design paradigms and apply those to a new app that's built inside Flutter. So that will save us time on the UI UX portion, and also money. As I mentioned, those engagements can be anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 typically for an MVP. The great thing too about having a web app is a lot of times where people get hung up, or development firms get hung up, is in the business requirements for an application. And what I mean by that is, if you're filling out a form on a web app, there's a lot of times like rules. You have to fill this field out, and if you fill it out, then you have to fill out this field. That type of figuring that kind of logic out takes time. If you have a web app, you would have already figured all that out, and so that will save time as well.
All right, wonderful. Well, I don't think I see any more questions, but those were great questions. Thank you so much, everyone who joined today. Thank you, Sean and Will, for all your insights and your presentation today. That was fantastic. So if you have any questions, or if anyone's interested in your free consultation or the design session that we're offering, please reach out to us. There's also an email here for ask@mxotech.com. That's actually our account management email, so you could always email that with any questions you might have for MXO, or just give us a call at this main number. So thank you everyone so much for joining. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to the next webinar, hopefully as educational as this one. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.